Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our Lunch and Learn. I know that a lot of you are lifelong learning at Immaculata students. Welcome and thank you for attending. Birds, bugs, and our place in the natural world. So we've got 5 sessions coming up. I'll be teaching 4 of them, and then we'll have a guest. Our fourth class will be Lauren McGrath. She's the director of our watershed protection program. So just to give you a brief overview, for any of those who may not be familiar with the trust, the Willistown Conservation Trust has been around for the past 40 years, preserving land in the Willistown area, which is just 20 miles west of Philadelphia. And our program area encompasses about 28,000 acres in that region. We permanently protected 7,500 acres to date through what we call conservation easements. And so in addition to preventing unrestricted urban sprawl and conserving land in perpetuity, another of our mission is to connect people to the land, because what good is land conservation if no one has a land ethic? And so we have we've developed 4 robust program areas over the years. In addition to land protection, we have our habitat stewardship program based around our 4 different nature preserves. We try to keep them looking in tip-top shape for not only the wildlife, but also the people visitors. A lot of things like demonstration areas, like meadow demonstration areas, how to native wildflower, riparian restoration by planting native trees along stream sides. And incidentally, if you want to get your hands dirty this Halloween weekend, we've got a huge 100 native trees planting going in at Ashbridge Preserve to help with stream bank stabilization and wildlife habitat along the Ridley Creek. Sorry about that. My slides decided to stop advancing. Then we've got our regenerative agriculture program based out of Rushton Woods Preserve and Farm on Delchester Road in Newtown Square. This is just a small 6-acre farm that demonstrates the power of kind of going beyond organic, beyond sustainable. You're not just sustaining, you're actually regenerating and giving back to the environment, making your soils more healthy than they were before, creating strips of wildflower meadows and pollinator habitat alongside of the crops. It's kind of farming of old, the way our founding fathers did it before conventional agriculture took over. And that produces about 30,000 pounds of food on those just 6 acres of land. And it's a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture program. So we have about 150 families that buy into that program, come and get their fresh produce each week. And then we have our watershed protection program, which focuses on the Crum, Ridley, and Darby Creek watersheds. And we study things like macroinvertebrates. These are the aquatic insects that can tell you a lot about the water quality. And last but not least, our bird conservation program, nationally recognized bird conservation program. We've got 2 main kind of goals there. It's habitat conservation and monitoring birds through things like bird banding, which is our primary tool. And we'll be talking about that at a later class, but it's essentially putting the little metal band on the bird to identify it as a unique individual, and then releasing it into the wild and allowing the public to come and see and understand about these incredible migratory birds that are right in our backyards that we may not otherwise get a chance to see. So, and then I'll give you a brief overview of everything that I hope to cover. We'll see. We may not get to all of it, but so today we're going to start with sort of an ornithology 101, the origin of birds, and my favorite topic, bird song. maybe get into nesting, but probably save that for next time. Next week will be Ornithology 101 Part 2, and we'll talk about things like, we'll get into bird migration, we'll get into what's going on with birds today, how we can help them, and more information about sort of what we as the trust are doing to help bird conservation, including bird banding and regenerative farming. And then we'll talk about, on the third class, more about what you guys as individuals can do to help birds and insects and the entire food web, starting with your backyards, your consumer choices, like what coffee you buy, protecting birds at home with your glass, your windows, all kinds of those important ways to help birds. And then the fourth class will be Lauren McGrath, and she'll be talking about watershed conservation and the aquatic insects and their importance in the aquatic food webs. And then last but not least, the last class will talk about some charismatic insects like the fireflies and the moths that reign over our summer nights. So without further ado, I'll get started here to Ornithology 101. So ornithology is, of course, the study of birds. Birds are in the class Aves. There are more than 10,000 species of birds in the world today, and we gain new species through things like genetic splitting. So maybe the two birds look exactly the same. They always were identified as one species, and then they discover that they're genetically different. And then, of course, we lose birds every day to extinction. Unfortunately, extinction rates now, they say, are occurring at rates 1,000 times faster than the natural rates that existed before humans came onto the scene, the extinction rates of plants and animals today. More on that later, that depressing topic later. Right now, let's talk about the dazzling diversity of birds. So they have evolved to survive basically on almost every continent, and nearly every habitat. And the only organism that is as widespread as that is microscopic organisms. But you can see these are just some of our rainbow of birds that we've banded just at Rushton Farm. Rushton Farm is where our bird banding station is located. We've got screech owl, Baltimore oriole, scarlet tanager. Some of these are neotropical migrants that fly down to South America and back to Rushton each year. Beautiful indigo bunting there. So it's just, how can you not love birds? They come in all shapes and sizes and beautiful in all their many colors. So as we said, avian distribution, they're found nearly everywhere on Earth, but no bird species has a complete worldwide distribution. This is a map of bird distribution, and you can see the darker colors are more species. So we see this in the biological kingdom. Mostly species are going to increase the closer you get to the equator, where you have equal day and night, same solar energy. So you have more species diversity there, of course, in the tropical regions. Peregrine falcon has the broadest of the natural breeding ranges, every continent except for Antarctica. And this is a map from eBird, which we'll talk about at a later class. eBird is one of the world's largest wildlife databases today. This is a map of all the sightings of peregrine falcons, says 2014 to 2019. And these are all from citizen scientists, so bird watchers all around the world that submit their observations to eBird, and helps to pull up to generate things like range maps for these different birds. And of course, the peregrine falcon is incidentally the fastest animal on the planet, reaching speeds of 240 miles per hour in what you call a stoop, when they're diving after prey in the sky. Barn owls, a close second, found on 5 of 7 continents. Then we have the barn swallow. This is a migratory bird found on 4 continents during breeding and another 2 during its migration. Then we have seabirds. These are pelagic birds that spend most of their lives out over the open ocean. And these 3 birds are the birds that span the widest in their ranges. They span all of the 5 major oceans: Wilson storm petrel, sooty shearwater, Arctic terns. So they really are, birds are just all over the planet, even over the oceans. And so scientists now all agree that birds are living descendants of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are a group of reptiles that radiated some 230 million years ago and enjoyed being the dominant land animal until the extinction event 66 million years ago that ended the Cretaceous. And so you can think of birds as a subgroup of dinosaurs that emerged late within the greater dinosaur radiation. So they have a common ancestor. It's a theropod dinosaur about 130 million years ago. So the birds evolved from these feathery raptor-like dinosaurs 150 million years ago. And they were all, just like the birds today, the avian dinosaurs. There were a wide array of diversity that evolved. There were loon-like avian dinosaurs with teeth that swam. There were avian dinosaurs that flew with long streamers behind them. And they enjoyed diversity and evolution until, again, 66 million years ago, the KPG extinction event that occurred. So the asteroid hit, burned up, the friction from it burned up the atmosphere and caused forest fires all over the world and blotted out the sun. And then 75% of the animals in the Cretaceous met their demise. But the one that gave the avian dinosaur that gave rise to the modern birds today survived. And the reason may have been toothless beaks. It had a toothless beak. So ornithologists first thought that birds developed toothless beaks because it allowed them a flight advantage and made them lighter weight so that they could fly. But the fossil record shows that even avian dinosaurs that had teeth did fly probably pretty well. So the thing that the toothless beak offered is an evolutionary advantage in that they could switch their dietary niche. So now I had a different role in the ecosystem. So when the avian dinosaurs with teeth, they were carnivores. So they snatched small mammals. But after the extinction event, when the sun was blotted out and most animal life disappeared, it suited you to be a vegetarian. So the toothless beaked avian dinosaurs were able to subsist on hunting, pecking around for the seeds and nuts of the forests while they waited for the sun to come back out. So they survived. So then we may have all heard of Archaeopteryx. This is the oldest known organism that was indeed a bird. So this was found in the 1860s in limestone sediment in Germany. It was clearly had some avian characteristics and some impressions all around the bones of the arms and the legs of feathers. And so this is the oldest organism that was a bird. So it's not, there's a lot missing from the fossil record. They say this is not the direct link to modern birds. It's rather a representative of an extinct offshoot of early birds. So it had, so the plumage, the feathers were bird-like. It had a large brain that many of our modern birds have today, and the skeletal anatomy. But then it had some non-avian theropod dinosaur-like traits like the teeth and then the claws on the ends of the wings. But it's a close link. So our modern avian characteristics, again, birds are shaped their whole evolution to fly. So they've got partially fused vertebrae, a lightweight skeletal system, beak, and then they've got all these other characteristics that make a bird, like song and eggs and feathers, some of which we'll talk about next. And then what makes all of the dazzling diversity of birds is adaptation, essentially. They're all perfectly adapted to fit all their many different variety of habitats. For example, the chickadee, birds like the chickadee have a large hippocampus. That's the area of the brain associated with remembering locations, because these little forest birds hide seeds to find and eat during the winter. In the middle, we have an albatross, a seabird that spends much of his life out over the open ocean. They have a special wing locking device so that they don't need to flap continuously hours on end. And then, of course, the sweet little hummingbirds have specialized bills, the curvature of which often matches the flowers that they're feeding on. So many of the diversity of birds, you can look at their beaks. It's a reflection of what they eat. You can have, this is a great little infographic of all the different kinds of beaks. You've got ones for dip netting, like the pelicans, ones for insect catching, like the warblers. You've got the nectar feeders, kind of like the hummingbird. So then, how do a bunch of birds occupy the same type of habitat, without outcompeting one another? The answer is niche or niche, kind of like tomato, tomato, however you want to pronounce it. But that's the role or its job in the community. So this is sort of a famous little diagram where you have 3 different kinds of warblers that all live in this northern spruce forest, but they don't outcompete each other because they feed at different levels of the tree. So Cape May warbler, this is one that you'll get warbler neck trying to see, a beautiful warbler. It's always at the very tippy tops of the trees. And then the bay-breasted warbler feeds sort of in the middle layer. And then you have the yellow-rumped warbler, which is more of an understory forager. And then same goes for, say, all these different shorebirds on the coast, feeding in a beach type habitat. They may all be occupying the exact same habitat, but they're all gleaning different food sources based on different bill capacities. So the forces of natural selection are always in motion. That's what created all of this diversity of bills and niches, and it's still occurring today. So one of the largest recent studies to try to start understanding how animals might react to climate change or might evolve to adapt to climate change was done. A scientist in Chicago collected over 70,000 specimens of, unfortunately, window-killed birds in the city of Chicago, of over 50 different North American migratory bird species over 40 years. And he discovered something interesting. He discovered that their body sizes are actually shrinking. It's not noticeable to you and I, but measuring the specimens, it was significant. So, and the reason for this may be because as temperatures warm, animals can cool off quicker if they have a larger surface area to volume ratio. So that explains the smaller body size. And then these are migratory birds. So if you have a smaller body size, then you may have less energy reserves to make a long migration. And so then the ones that are surviving have longer wingspans to sort of compensate for this smaller energy reserve. So it's interesting, they think. So they surmise that climate change is causing birds to shrink and wingspans to grow. Other interesting bird characteristics are that their bones are pneumatic. So that word just means filled with spaces, not totally dense. So the picture, this is a picture of a flighted bird, more pneumatic then say this is a penguin. So that's a non-flighted bird. So less spaces. But the pneumatic bones allow the birds to be able to sit on their eggs without breaking them. They allow for flight. They also allow for connection with what's called air sacs, another unique trait of birds. So the air sacs are these transparent sacs that extend from the lungs to different regions of the body that act as bellows to bring air in and hold it until expiration. So basically, every breath we take is like 4 breaths to a bird. They're very, very efficient with their oxygen. So songs and vocalizations. So vocalizations of a bird, we know that that's part of what makes a bird is that they are so not only visible with their colors, but their sounds. They really liven our world with all their different vocalizations, whereas, you know, other animals are more quiet, so not as distinct. So there's songs and there are calls. So a bird's song is going to be loud. It's a loud broadcast. It's much more complex. And this is mostly used by the male birds during the breeding season. However, there's some species that will also the female will sing, but generally it's a male thing during the breeding season to attract the female and also to defend against other males. So, and birds can tell a lot from each other's songs. We may not hear these different nuances, but they do. So the female bird listening to the male song, she can learn a lot about that male. She can learn maybe how old he is, how long he's been in the area, if he has a weird dialect, maybe he's not from here or hasn't been here for long. She can tell his fitness, how many different nuances he has to his song, how complex it is. And she can also tell things like, are other birds trashing him? Like, are they singing over him? So she's listening to all of that as she's selecting her mate based on his song. And then there are calls. And a bird call is just short and simple. They use these all throughout the year. The great example of this is the chickadee that goes chickadee dee 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 dee. That's their call. So they're just chatting to each other about food sources. They're maybe warning each other about predators or potential threats. And incidentally, a chickadee, they actually will measure the threat of a predator with the number of Ds in their call. A scientist did a project on that and found that, like, for a sharp-shinned hawk, which is a forest hawk that will hunt small songbirds, the chickadee will say chickadee dee 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 dee, like rapid Ds, many Ds. Whereas if it's just like, I don't know, maybe a big fat dog walking by, the chickadee doesn't assume it's a very big threat. It might just do a couple Ds. So many interesting research projects done on bird song and call. Another great one is the white-throated sparrow. They tested white-throated sparrows in the lab while they had their breeding hormones, and the female on estrogen, when she heard the male song, her brain responded similarly as ours does when we're hearing pleasant music, whereas the male hopped up on testosterone, his brain, the amygdala, sort of the emotional center of the brain, lit up the same way that a human would when they hear that scary music coming on while watching a like horror movie. So, because to a male bird during the breeding season, hearing another male bird's song is a threat. So here is a great way to learn songs, is to look at, this is called a spectrogram, and Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great source for these spectrograms. So it shows the frequency of the sound over time, and the brighter the line is, the color is, like that bright yellow, means louder tone. So you can kind of follow along the spectrogram as you hear the song of the common yellowthroat. So and then there's mnemonic devices that birders use to help remember the distinct songs of the different species. And for the common yellowthroat, it's witchity, 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 witch. And then here is the black-capped chickadee that says, "Hey, sweetie." So let's see if you can get that from this. So that's the chickadee song, whereas the call is just the chickadee-dee. So these are all songbirds, and the songbirds are in the suborder of the passerines called the ocine. So passerines are perching birds, but not all perching birds are songbirds. So there's about over 4,600 species of our songbirds. And songbirds have a special voice box called a syrinx. So our voice box is larynx, and it's closer to like the back of the mouth. Whereas for birds, a syrinx is located further down the trachea, where it branches into two bronchi. So here it is blown up here. And so it's this two-part device that allows a lot of variation for sound. So 100% of the air going through a bird's syrinx is used for vocalization, whereas for humans, it's only like 2% of the air that goes through there. So again, birds are efficient at everything they do. And because it's a two-part structure, they can also do things like they can duet with themselves. There can be a sound coming out of both of these, so that's slowed down and you can actually hear two voices at once. They can close off one side and then the other to alternate. It's pretty incredible. And let me, at this point, I'm going to go into a different screen share. So give me just a minute here, because I want to show you the Cornell Lab of Ornithology Birdsong Academy, where they actually show the syrinx working. Let's see. Here you go. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to play. So can everybody see that? You can see the different songs. So that was the northern cardinal. So the northern cardinal, I'm going to go back to my presentation here. Okay, I think I did that somewhat seamlessly. I'm back in the presentation. I hope you guys all are too. Okay, so here is the northern cardinal. So as we just saw, it switches the sides of the syrinx during the song, and it can incredibly cover more pitches than a piano in the 10th of a second. This is a popular yard bird, the northern cardinal. So that mnemonic device for that song is cheer, cheer, birdie, birdie. And then the wood thrush, one of my favorites. All of the thrushes have incredible singing abilities. And this is one of the birds, woodland birds, that can duet with themselves. So both sides of the syrinx are being used simultaneously, and it creates this really ethereal sound that you hear in our northern woodlands in the summer. Okay. So bird song. Some birds have it encoded in their genes, some of the passerines, and then the songbirds have to actually learn their song. So most birds, like ducks, loons, herons, hawks, and the songbirds' closest relative, the flycatchers, shown here is a little Acadian flycatcher. These are things like the wood pewee, phoebe. They're not quite songbirds, but they're pretty close. They have their song encoded in their genes. So then some of the examples of songbirds that need to learn their song, you have a list here of starlings, warblers, sparrows, finches, even hummingbirds and parrots. So they have to learn their song, and song learning is pretty rare in the animal kingdom. They say it's really only humans, bats, and whales that do this. Even our closest relative, the chimps, don't have this sort of learning ability of vocalizations. So song learning is an interesting thing in birds. It's partially learned, and then it's partially coded in the DNA of most songbird species. So then they have what's called the song crystallization period. So I always imagine this as a baby bird has in its brain the puzzle pieces of its song, its eventual adult song. It's equipped with all of nature gave it all of those pieces, but it's like a jumble. It's like a pile of puzzle pieces, like if you dump out the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and they're not in order yet. And so the bird, after it leaves the nest, after it's been listening to dad's song, then it's getting around on its own. In the fall, it starts, or the end of summer and fall, it starts to practice and start piecing together those jigsaw pieces to figure out what works and what makes it sound like dad's song. And so then you have the song crystallization period. So they only have a certain window of time to kind of get it right. And they do if they have heard their species, their song. And so that's when you can imagine all the jigsaw pieces come together, and then it gets glued together, the puzzle's glued together, and it is what it is from then on. So they've done studies and isolated baby birds from their species song in the lab, and the song turns out a lot simpler. So this is an isolate song. So this is the white-crowned sparrow that didn't hear dad's song. So you can see the spectrogram is much less complex than the typical song, which has all these ups and downs. So further proof that they need to learn, that they learn from a tutor. That's the normal song of a white-crowned sparrow, followed by the isolated song. And then next is the isolated song. Whoops, that's still a normal song. Here's the isolated. So you can hear that the last song is so much more simpler and sadder than the first song that has all those ups and downs and complexities. And then some birds, like the gray catbird, which you may be familiar with, this is a common yard bird in the summertime. They actually, when they had a young bird in the lab without a tutor, his song actually came out pretty much the same as one that was tutored by an adult. So some species may not need as much learning as others. And then there are cool birds like the northern mockingbird that are open-ended learners as opposed to age-limited. So that means a northern mockingbird all its life can keep adding songs to its repertoire so that it may eventually have like 100 songs that it can run through. You can sit, a birder who knows songs by ear, you can sit and listen to local mockingbird, and you can know all of the different songs all the different species of birds that mockingbird has encountered in its life as it mimics and goes through all of them. So pretty cool. So now I'm just going to go back to, these are just some, if you want to learn more about birdsong, the Academy, allaboutbirds.org is a great resource. And then Birdsong Hero, which we're going to get into now, I'll show you that. And then there's a couple new apps, Merlin, which a lot of people are using now. You can just hold up your phone now, and the technology has it that it can identify all the songs in your backyard and tell you all the different species, which is pretty incredible. So it's really good for learning birds. Whereas when you go out into a habitat and you hear birds, you would have no idea, if you weren't a birder, which is which. So Merlin can help you learn. And then Larkwire is another great app that you can download local, regional song packs. So you can start to learn your birds in the area. So you can eventually go outside and not use Merlin and identify your neighbor birds. So I'm gonna do a new share here and try and get back to there. Okay, so we're back in the Cornell Lab of Ornithology Academy. Whoops, we went too fast. So this is cool. You can hear, so in the fall, as I said, the baby birds have to learn their songs. We can hear white-throated sparrows that are now back from the northern forest. They may overwinter here. We can actually hear the young, we call them hatchier. They were hatched this summer in northern forests. You can hear them practicing now. They don't sound right. They don't sound like the adult. It sounds like they're what we call babbling. So you can hear this is a white-throated sparrow. They have, the mnemonic for them is Old Sam, Peabody, Peabody, or Oh, Canada, Canada. So here is the perfect one. And then here is a baby doing his sub-song of babbling in the fall. Oops. Play that again for you. So you can hear it's not as structured as the adult. And then I wanted to show you Birdsong Hero. So Birdsong Hero, you can do this on your own if you want to start learning birdsong. It helps your brain because you see the spectrograms and try and match the birdsong with the spectrogram. So here we go. We'll play song number one. I'll play that one again, and you guys tell me if you think it's A, B, or C. Are you guys still there?
C.
Thanks. Let's see. You got it.
Hey, good job, Jim.
All right. So that's a fun game to play to help learn. That's just a, oh, here we use sample. So here's another one. We'll do one more. A, B, or C?
Hey,
I would have said B.
Okay, I'm gonna go with B. Yep, it is the tufted titmouse. The mnemonic for them is Peter, Peter, Peter. So this, I don't know if they'll play it for me. There you go. So that's a little warbler, the American redstart. You can, yeah, it goes up on the end. So lots of different variation of songs.
And what is the name of this app?
So this actually is not an app, I don't believe. This is called Birdsong Hero. It's a birdsong learning game. It's on academyallaboutbirds.org. And they have a bunch of different learning games and slideshows. They have a lot of great resources, but Birdsong Hero, if you just Google Birdsong Hero, this will come up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm going to go back. That guy. All right. So at this point, I can stop and pause for any questions, or if there's no more questions, I can just keep plowing forward. More good stuff about birds. So let me, maybe I'll stop my share for a minute here. Whoops. So that I can see your faces.
I would just comment that the Merlin is an amazing little app to add to your iPhone. I guess it's for Android as well, but the problem with it is that it's sort of like using a calculator. You forget how to calculate. Of course, I never did learn bird songs very well after all your classes, but I'm actually getting a little better using Merlin because you can identify which direction they are.
Oh.
It actually can help. So
it actually tells you which one's coming from which direction.
Yeah, you can aim it sort of.
Yeah, so that'll help, especially if you're out birding in the spring and you've got like 20 different bird species singing at once.
Yeah, I highly recommend Merlin. It's on your iPhones or whatever.
Cool.
But I don't think it does very well at recognizing babbling birds, though. It does get confused right now when there's some babblers out there.
Yeah. The baby babblers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Cornell Lab of Ornithology is quite an incredible resource. I think they've got one of the biggest wildlife sound databases in the world. All right, are there any other questions on anything that we've covered so far, or comments or thoughts?
yeah, I was wondering, you said that the soaring birds can lock their wings, so they can, how do they do that? How do they lock their wings?
It's just a special mechanical device. I don't know exactly how it works. I would have to look into that further, but you see that a lot with birds. They also have, perching birds, when the leg is bent, it locks their claw, so they don't have to think about when they're perching on a branch, like you and I would have to be consciously grabbing. But as long as that joint bends, it engages the locking in their claws. So they don't have to think about grabbing the branch. So it's a similar mechanism with the pelagic seabirds, I believe.
What, can you say anything about birds that learn to talk, like parrots and sometimes starlings, I heard, can imitate sounds?
Yeah, they're mimicking. So those are mostly birds like in the mimic family, including like the starlings, or birds in the parrot family that have that ability. But yeah, it's just they're learning. They're just learning different intra-species vocalizations. They're learning to use it. But so you wouldn't be able to do that for a closed-ended learner, So parrots must be open-ended learners, kind of like the northern mockingbird. Because if you have a pet parrot, African gray parrots that people teach language, they must be super smart and able to add more to the repertoire.
When I was a child, there was somebody had a pet crow, and it would
Oh.
sit on top when the child went to school. He would sit on the doorway and he would say, "Gonna be late, gonna be late, gonna be late, gonna be late."
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's funny. We have a question in the chat. Oops. Do birds copy insect noises? Huh. That's a good question. Not to my knowledge, but I could be wrong. I mean, there's a bird, the lyrebird, in South America. You see it in David Attenborough's Planet series. That's shown. There's a video of it imitating a chainsaw. So, which is really eerie to hear a bird imitating a chainsaw that's cutting down its habitat. So, I mean, if some birds can imitate a chainsaw, I would imagine they can also imitate insect noises too. And then, can praying mantis kill small birds, or is this a myth? Unfortunately, that's not a myth. I don't think it's very common, but I've seen the YouTube video of a praying mantis perched on a hummingbird feeder and grabbed an unsuspecting hummingbird. It's possible. The invasive non-native Chinese mantids that we have a lot of now are bigger than our native mantids, and so they do have that ability, but it's by no means their priority prey. They go for insects. They sit on flowers and grab pollinators. You see them with butterflies and bumblebees in their talons. I think I got all the questions in the chat.
There's one more in there about some crows in a backyard.
Oh,
See that one
we
there?
have 3 crows in the backyard that are always together, and we've seen bully a hawk on multiple occasions. Oh, maybe we've seen them bully a hawk. Is this normal? Why would they be doing this? So yeah, the hawks sometimes will take crows' nests because hawks don't, some of them don't build their own nests, so they may mob and scare crows off to steal their nests. And then also some hawks, like Cooper's hawks, do eat other birds, so the crows will consider them a threat. And they do what's called, the bullying is defined as it's called mobbing. So you'll see crows engage in mobbing behavior. And this is sort of evolved because if there's a threat around, if you all group together and say, we see you, then it can't do anything. And it's safety in numbers. And blue jays will do this too, because they're also a very social species of birds. And you may see them mobbing hawks as well, or owls. If they find a roosting owl during the day, will do the same thing and alert everyone to the threat. So then it's no longer a threat because it's been exposed. Everybody knows it's there. All right, great. Well, I think we have a few more minutes, so I'll go back to my presentation and get into some other.
I was going to mention, just quickly to jump in, we do have a couple of bird walks coming up. So if anybody is interested in visiting one of our preserves, since we're talking about birds this week, on November 2nd and November 13th. November 2nd is a Tuesday and the 13th is a Saturday. So if you take a look at our calendar on our website, you can go ahead and sign up and come out for a bird walk with some of our bird folks.
Yeah. Thanks, Lindsay. Yep, and those are led by some members of our bird conservation committee that are expert birders, so you don't need to have any prior experience. All right. Well, for those of you who can stick around a little longer, I'll just jump back in to presentation here. Whoops, that's not, sorry. Share the right screen here. There you go. So next we're talking about feathers. So feathers also come in a Dazzling diversity. That's the only characteristic that is unique to birds. And of course, we learned a few slides ago that the avian dinosaurs had feathers. So feathers actually evolved before our modern birds for things like decoration, thermoregulation, protection from the sun, from ultraviolet radiation. And now our modern day birds also use feathers for flight, of course. And they're visible in all the colors we can see and probably lots more. So birds may be even more colorful to themselves than they are to us. Oops. There we go. All these different types of feathers. You've got tail feathers, wing feathers. Then there's these little under feathers. So a bird is essentially wearing a multi-layered winter jacket almost. The outer layer would be like the waterproof, and then the inner layer of the downy feathers. And then you've got some other specialized feathers, like this is a bristle and a whippoorwill that's on its face, that's like little whiskers, help them catch insects. So all kinds of feather modifications. And I'll just leave you with this incredible bird of paradise courtship spectacle. These are birds that have evolved huge diversity of feathers, and probably the pinnacle of feather diversity in the tropics.
In the great island of New Guinea, there are 42 different species of birds of paradise, each more bizarre than the last. This forest is so rich that nourishing food can be gathered very quickly. That leaves the male six-plumed bird of paradise with time to concentrate on other matters, like tidying up his display area. Everything must be spick and span. All is ready. Very impressive, but no one is watching. The superb bird of paradise calls to attract a female. And he has more luck. But what does he have to do to really impress her? She retires to consider her verdict. It's hard not to feel deflated when even your best isn't good enough.
So that going back to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology also has courses just around those birds of paradise, the birds of paradise species, because they just have such intricate courtship dances and displays. There's whole all kinds of research and courses around just that alone. So you can get into that too if you want on Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So I think I'll just end with this one slide and then we'll pick up here next time. So feathers they seem so special, but they're really just made of keratin, the same thing as our nails. Of course, we said they evolved before birds. And interestingly, when you see a bird preening, so sitting there, moving its bill over its feathers, it's actually trying to realign these barbs. So a feather is sort of, when you look at it under a microscope, it's like Velcro. It has these perpendicular little struts called barbules. There's the big ones that go horizontal are barbs, and then the perpendicular ones are barbules. And these can come sort of detached through wear, flying through the brush, weather, and they realign these to sort of to redo that Velcro to make sure that their flight capacity is full and their waterproofing is intact and all of that a bird needs. So they're just realigning, resticking the Velcro essentially. So, and then color in feathers is also interesting. So the birds like finches that have reds and yellows, those colors in its plumage come from actually plants, carotenoids or caterpillars that are eating plants. But those are pigments that the bird must ingest. And then darker birds like sparrows, crows, that is in their genes. That's from melanin, the pigment melanin. And then finally, the blues, the beautiful blues that you see in a blue jay. This is a blue jay feather up at the top. And then, of course, the familiar, beautiful eastern bluebird. Those are actually not pigment at all, but just structure. And if you took a bluebird feather and you hammered it, you took a hammer to it or stuck it in like a mortar and pestle and went away, chopped away at it, it would no longer be blue because you are destroying that structure that creates the blue. So there's a fun little experiment for you to try at home. All right, so with that, I'll stop my share and say goodbye to everybody until next week.